I see. Yeah. There is hope.
Yes.
That's gonna give you time to save money, yeah.
Exactly.
You know.
I get you.
Yeah.
I've got like a
So that's something that works.
right, it's never done.
If any of these.
Except
When
when I walk in.
Yeah,
So.
well, that's important.
What?
And then you're gonna move them to.
And works in companies. Right, people.
Can you hear us?
You're gonna hand it to Jen.
With you.
But not.
Just go wherever you want to go. Get a couple coats.
Wherever you get.
Are you just hearing me,
Well,
or can you
so-
hear
so one of the
others,
funny
people
things-
also speaking in the room?
Room.
I can hear everybody. Okay, sweet, thank you.
We can hear now.
I don't speak Spanish recently.
I am, representing TAR and two.
If everybody could mute if you're connected to Zoom, just so we're not getting the feedback.
You like a good reverb.
Yeah. She still comes and visits.
You know, if you could make me a co-host, it'd be on the video, Potter Tours. I have no idea. Well, here we are. We'll duck together. All right, welcome, everybody. It is 4:32. Well done. You defeated Telluride time. So glad we're all here. And my name is Lance Waring. I'm one of the 3 county commissioners. And I am honored to be opening this meeting where we're going to fall housing. I think the first thing I would like to do is ask us to go around the room and just say our name and our affiliation so that everybody can get a feel for who's coming from what angle. And Haley, if you'd like to start, we'll just go around the real room first and the virtual room next, and then we'll have a sense of who's here and what's what.
Great. My name's Hallie Simpson. I'm on the County Planning Commission. I joined just after the East End Master Plan was created, so I'm new to the scene and excited to get my feet wet with housing.
I'm Lee Taylor. I'm also with the Planning Commission. Been there a little bit longer than Hallie has. So I'm looking forward to this new venue of conversation and solutions.
I'm Anna Wilson. I'm the homeowner down in Two Rivers, and I serve on that HOA board as well. And I also just finished up my term as president of the Telluride Association of Realtors. So I'm coming at this with 2 hats on.
My name is Nick Farco. I'm citizen at large, so not representing anybody, but have a 30+ year history in design, development, and construction.
Hi, Pete Johnson. I've been working with lands around here for about 35 years and ski ranch resident.
Elaine Demas, been in the area for 35 years. I work at the Tyler Foundation and I run their, our workforce housing initiative. I'm Nina Cote and I, am an employee and of retirement in Norwood. So I'm kind of representing the seniors in Norwood here.
My name's Danny Kraft, born and raised in Telluride, work at Alpine Bank. Yeah, been heavily involved in the community.
Amy Levick, I've been here 38 years. I've been involved in planning, I've been an elected official, I've worked with nonprofits. I've been involved with.
District, in 60 years.
Catherine Moran, my day job is communications manager for Mountain Village, but in this capacity, I'm serving as Lawson Hill representative. I've lived in Lawson Hill for the last 5 years as a homeowner, and I am on that board.
I'm Drew Nelson, I'm the housing director for the town of Village.
Freya Reza, housing specialist with the county, and if anybody would like the packet, raise your hand, I'll go.
Jared Biggs, I'm deputy county manager, been in the neighborhood for a couple of years now, also a resident of Wasco.
I'm Kay Simonson, I'm the county planning director. And also once upon a time I was with Telluride, so I was here, I was gone, I'm back.
Sarah Brown, Western Spaces. I also grew up here with Danny. Do not currently live here, but have a long history with the community and particularly with affordable and workforce housing.
Last but not least, or maybe, who knows? I'm Jen Gardner with Logan Simpson. Where Sarah and I are part of the consultant team working on this project. I have a long history of working on land use codes, and specifically with housing, removing barriers to housing.
Thank you, Jen. Let's go to the Zoom room, and those folks that are on the Strategic Stakeholder Roundtable Committee should be co-hosts and should be able to unmute and introduce themselves. I'll start with the name I recognize, Stephanie Solomon.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
I could hear you, Stephanie, on the Zoom.
Great. Okay, because my video isn't on for some reason. Sorry about that. I am a 26-year Telluride resident and am currently in private practice as an attorney. Most of the county staff and attorneys I've met through my work at Telsky. I was in-house counsel there for 12 years and I resigned at the beginning of the summer, and now I'm back in private practice. Happy to be part of this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Go to Paul Major.
Hello, I'm Paul Major. I've been around for too long, but I was the developer of the Pinion Park project in Norwood in partnership with the town of Norwood and the county. It's actually 24 homes, not 20.
Thank you, Paul. Jason Souls.
Hi there, Jason Souls, Mountain Village resident and developer of the Bedrock Rico 10-unit project in Rico.
Thank you, Jason. How about Antonio Deliani?
Tony Durrani, 40+ year resident, San Miguel County, representing the Norwood Water Commission.
Thank you, Tony. I am scanning the Zoom room and I'm not sure because I don't have the list memorized of anybody else that is on as a formal member of the committee. I know we've got some members of the public. James Van Hooser. 88.
I'll make him a co-host.
Okay, we're gonna make you a co-host, James, so you can speak at us.
Robin.
James Van Hooser, Town of Telluride. Happy to be here.
Oh,
James and Robin.
if you have a voice, we can introduce you if not.
She just She just chatted it.
Okay.
She has lost her voice.
Okay, Robin is another member of our team who was supposed to be here with us today. She has fallen ill and has no voice, so we'll let her rest her voice and listen in.
Great. Is there anybody else virtually that we should be unmuting to speak? If you are a member of the public, you are welcome to listen in. And there will be plenty of opportunity for public input. But for right now, we're going to limit public comment to those that are actually on the committee, because we've got a lot of folks in the room and a lot of folks on Zoom to hear from. The other quick item that I'd like to remind us all of is the ground rules for our meetings. They're very simple. I'm sure that it's going to be easy for us, but it's one person speaking at a time. Please challenge ideas, not people, of course. This is simple stuff. Share airtime and stay on topic as best we can, although I think we are going to have to drift because it's all woven together like a giant tapestry. Phones on silent if you possibly can. And this is the hardest one for me. Assume positive intent. Actually, that's not so hard. And I say that because I trust and confidence in everybody in this room that we are going to work as best as we can together. We're going to disagree when we need to, and we're going to come up with hopefully actionable solutions that we can implement and not just talk about possibilities. That's my dream. We'll see if we can get there. With that, Jen, would you like to set us up with why we're here and what we're going to do?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so for the agenda that's behind me, we put in some very rough timeframes in here to try to keep us on task and on time. If we're really delving into a really, important topic, we obviously can flex a little bit within that. We do need to try to be out here by 6 o'clock. I think we could flex a little towards 6:30 if all are willing to stay a little bit longer. So we're going to do a little welcome exercise, 2 different discussion items, have a short break, and then a third discussion item, and then some next steps in closing. Yeah, so we really appreciate all of you being here. I know it's probably, you have a lot going on in your lives, and it's hard to come out sometimes on a Monday evening. But we do really appreciate that. That was kind of the time that worked for everyone on our team to be able to pull this together. But today, as Commissioner Waring was mentioning, we really do want to prioritize what's the most critical elements of this project, and we'll go over a little bit more detail here. So why we're here, we're really here to build on previous efforts that have already been completed for the county. So building on the East End Master Plan, the community housing zone experience, any other planning work that has been done over the years, specifically targeted at housing. We're really getting down into the regulations with this effort. So it's taking all of that experience, all the planning that we've already done as a community, and starting to look at where in the regulations we have created barriers to achieve those goals, or where things just aren't in alignment with plans. For example, the East End Master Plan has future land use categories. We want to make sure the zoning categories align with the policies and goals of those categories. This is funded by Proposition 123 Local Planning Capacity Grant from DOLA. Really what we hope this positions the county will position the county for future funding with DOLA. That's a whole nother topic, but by keeping the code updated and in compliance with Proposition 123, it just continues to allow the county to capitalize on those funding sources. Okay, so we have 3 kind of primary phases to this project. We're right in the foundation phase right now. So the whole purpose of this trip for Sarah and I, and for this meeting tonight, is to really understand what's working and what's not with the current regulations, programs, incentives related to housing. And that's not just affordable housing, that's housing all the way around. So looking at the full spectrum of housing. And we'll get into that a little bit more in detail. So we gather all this information from you all, from the community. We've been meeting with folks throughout the day today to try to understand from a variety of perspectives, what's working and what's not with the current code. Then we'll take that into an issue identification and analysis phase. And that's where we read through the code in detail. We have taken a first pass through the code to get our heads into it. But even just in conversations today, it's, oh, I want to dive a little deeper into this little piece and that little piece and this little piece based on kind of what we're hearing. We'll piece all that together into a report that says, here's kind of what we're seeing that maybe is out of alignment, and here's maybe some good things that are in alignment. And what those recommendations could be to move the code forward to allow for a larger variety of housing. Ultimately, that will take us into phase 3, where we will actually create some language to go along with that the county can choose to implement or tweak as needed. We do plan to engage with you all at least once in each phase. There might be 2 or 3 meetings in phase 2. I'm gonna pass it.
So just sort of to ground ourselves a little bit in what is going on in the community, for the housing needs assessment, where these numbers come from. Typically a housing needs assessment will break it out into what is catch up, where you're currently behind, and then what is keep up, what you need to continue to produce as jobs grow, as residents retire. So these numbers really relate to your catch up numbers, where you're currently behind. There's about 1,400 employees commuting into the county for work daily. And those are those that are living outside of San Miguel County, not just outside of the town. About 200 unfilled jobs. So employers are having a hard time finding workers that will either make that commute or can afford to live nearby. The survey found that there were 70 people that are mostly homeless or in temporary housing. And then about 110 units that are in overcrowded conditions. And these are all stats that feed into the housing that's needed now to support these people. There are other numbers involved, but that's just the catch-up number that I wanted to highlight. And then if we want to look at who can afford to live here, I think these numbers are shocking, but you've all seen them. Presumably you've all looked at the housing needs assessment. In 2024, only 20% of homes sold were affordable to households earning below 200% of the area median income, and that's close to about $200,000 for a 3-person household. Of all your residents, 29% are paying more than 30% of their income towards their housing payments. So they also, on top of that, have health insurance, they have transportation needs, they have all kinds of childcare needs if they have children. So that 30% is pretty high. 18% of those are moderately burdened, whereas another 11% are really severely cost burdened. And that's most likely not being able to afford regular groceries on top of their housing payments. Looking at the price gap, the median single family home is close to 4.56 million, or it's always moving, that point in time measure. And households earning about 250,000, which is 250% of your immediate income, they can afford about $966,000 for a home. And that's a gap between your median single family home price of about 3.6 million. So there's a pretty big gap where the market is meeting and where residents, households can afford. So thinking about that sort of the missing middle, which is that 200% AMI here. In many communities, it's 100% AMI. It varies based on the county and the community you're in. A lot of those units that would help those households either become renters or become homeowners are small scale multifamily units, like accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes. And these matter because they're a smaller footprint, they can be produced at a lower cost, shared construction costs, there's economies of scale. So these are some of the types of housing units that have been identified through the housing needs assessment, through other studies, that we can start to look for opportunities for across the county. Just gotta move this out of my controls. So what this means for the code update, the housing needs assessment identified over 1,000 housing units by 2034. Our code can make it easier to start addressing that need. That needs number does not mean you have to build that many right now. It's a way to measure where your community's at, and it's to give you a goal of something to work towards. This code update is focusing more on removing barriers so that it can be easier for the entire community to contribute to that housing need, basically. So what's within the scope, and some of this was in your packet if you had a chance to look at it. We're looking at zoning districts, looking at development standards, review processes, what the affordable housing requirements are, and the community housing zone lessons learned from that. What's not in the scope is water rights policy, municipal regulations, past project decisions, state and federal regulations, and tax policy. So we're really focusing on the land use. I believe you all understand your role as SSR. Lance laid it out for you for how we're going to conduct this meeting and all of our meetings. But we really want you all to be a sounding board for ideas and alternatives. So, bring your ideas to the table, share your experiences in the communities or things that we cannot just research and find out. We need to hear from you all about what your experiences are. Help identify unintended consequences. We all have different perspectives in looking at how things can progress or what things are allowed to happen. And bring technical analysis and, what your community values are on the table. And also feedback from your networks and those that you work with in the community. Your recommendations are advisory. Final decisions will be the Planning Commission, the Board of County Commissioners, but your input is incredibly important. We have highlighted how we work together, support, can live with it or cannot support, and we can move forward with decisions. So with that sort of quick introduction, high level, here's what we're looking at the code, here's what the community's seeing, some of the things that we might be trying to look for. We wanted to open it up to discussion. In your SSR packet, we asked you all to think about one project example that you might want to share. So a specific housing project you know about, or one that either worked well or that got stuck. And then a few things around that, like what type of project was it? What code provisions came to play in that project? What was the impact, time, cost, outcome? And then what did you learn and what can we learn from that? As we're really looking throughout this meeting and throughout this process to identify where there are patterns across multiple experiences, where there are things that we may be able to address. And some of the things that may keep coming up over and over again or can make it some easy targets to get started. If you don't have a story, that's okay. If you don't have something you can prepare with, but we'd like to go around the room just to start and just give a short, here's the experience. Here are some of the tell us high level points from the slide, and we'll leave this up here as we go. I think we can start from the left since we introduced everyone in that direction. So we could start with Hadley, if that works for you. If you want to pass to the next while you think about it, that's entirely acceptable as well.
Okay, my name's Hallie. I just wanted to mention the project that I have in mind is kind of a small change issue, but when San Bernardo was developed in 1992 or so, my understanding, obviously I wasn't there for that, but my understanding is that it was a little bit loosey-goosey on some of the regulations. And one of the ramifications of that today is they have septic system issues. Septic systems are undersized or they're failing. And it's come up repeatedly for that neighborhood. The only reason I bring that project up is because it's something to consider as we talk about fast tracking, as we talk about projects that can kind of screen through the advisory process and the approvals. We also want to make sure we don't lose some of the technical review of things like septic systems or how our utilities are going to connect and are they sized correctly.
There is a small housing development just on the edge of Norwood, and Kay, you're gonna have to remind me what the name of that is. It's right across from the fairgrounds.
The new one.
The new one.
Oh, LaSalle Vista.
Yeah, LaSalle Vista. An example of what we should be enabling. Private landowner, fairly young couple wanted to create affordable housing spaces, no frills for the Norwood and West End community. And it was a really interesting experience to try to figure out how we could approve the development and still protect the things that we were hired or appointed to protect. And I remember one of the hardest parts was, in fact, I'm not even sure how ultimately it got solved, was the need to be able to cross the highway across from the development. And as you know, that's when people come screaming into town right before they do the hard left into Norwood. And we knew that they wanted, the kids who would live there would want to get across the street to the school. And it was really complicated because there were water rights involved and ditches that might have to be moved. And it was, I felt really badly for the developer because he was a local fellow who wanted to do the right thing. And it was harder than I wished it had been to do. Now, that all said, he's selling lots now, right?
Well, he's advertising. I don't know if he sold any.
Right.
That's a great story.
The only project I have in mind was a private employer project in Two Rivers that the county staff are all very well aware of, that Telsky purchased lots in Two Rivers, developed, and were just given a lot of leeway, not at the fault of anyone. But just because of that, there were a lot of delays and the houses sat empty for years, by way of extensions and just a lot of back and forth conversations. But the county did a great job of really throwing the hammer down on them, and now they're all occupied, so we're happy.
There's probably going to be a little irony in what I say right now. In that,
Can't wait.
yeah, I can't wait. It's not that exciting. In that, not too long ago, I might have gotten a hug from the governmental entities for saying this, and now it's probably going to frustrate everybody in the room. I personally have not had any project prevented from a land use code. Complicated, yes, but prevented, no. And I guess with some hindsight of wisdom, I look back and go, those complications, were they annoying? Yes. Were they time consuming in cases? Yes. Were they a necessity of governmental checks and balances to protect a region and balance the way that you guys have outlined some of our goals here? Yes. And I appreciate that. So with that hindsight of wisdom though, too, I also look at that I've had the benefit of small and large scale projects in my career. So it really is a different dialogue when you're talking about small scale and large scale. The complications can kill small scale, and that we need to remove. The complications for large scale, that's the check and balance that I referred to. So I really, again, and I'm a broken record. A lot of you know that I've kind of spoken about large and small scale before. So hopefully at least I'm consistent. But I will say the biggest driver, and I'm sorry if I go past my time limit here, the biggest driver of projects failing or succeeding or getting off the ground or no go or go are economics. They're market risk. And so the things that a land use can do to help economics are fairly obvious, and those will be easy as we get into this. But the other, goes to certainty and speed. But speed not necessarily in the number of meetings, because when you talk the large scale, that's a necessity for the checks and balances, but the duration between the meetings, the duration in the initial stages, the certainty, and I dive right into the details. When you get into, by rights analysis, certainty really is what makes a guy like me go, you know what, I'm willing to spend a bunch of money on planning and design and get a good application, a good project in here, if I know there's some certainty on board. So that's about all I have to say. But again, apologize for not being one story. It's more of anecdotal looking back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's my turn to jump all over the board. My experience with housing is a little limited, and it goes way back. This was years ago when I was in the fire department, and we used to respond to Big Billies. And this was at the time when Big Billies, they jammed everybody in there. And it got to the point we'd have to ask for security for law enforcement to join us on every fire call. So as soon as we got a fire call, we'd have to have the cops attend those fire calls. And so that was a real eye opener to me, what happens within the dynamics of housing. Sometimes when we get all these people from all these different places and then push them all together in a space that really shouldn't accommodate that many people, and the wheels fall off. And so that was a fascinating experience for me. Now that I'm looking, and I'm grateful to be on this board, I've worked on a lot of land issues on the county. And I see what's happening within our county from infrastructure, you know, from traffic, from water, from sewage. And, you know, one question I'd like to ask is, do we have a traffic study? Do we have an infrastructure study? Because we can talk about these changes of zoning and allow for housing so that we can have more housing. But if we don't have that information, it makes it very difficult to be able to say, okay, we can have X amount of housing here, 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 if our infrastructure can't handle it. The second thing, I looked at the community survey and I looked at so many things that are important to our community: clean air, wildlife, a sense of community, all of these different things. And what I want to really be careful of is that we have a balance between the holy grail of housing, which we all agree is important, at the sacrifice of the other assets that to me is incredibly important and why we all live here. So I think there needs to be a balance. And so my thought and hope is that we can look at housing placed near the jobs so that we don't damage this place that we all value so much. Kind of off topic. There you go.
As it relates to development and projects, I'm gonna just yield my time to the next person. Because I think my experience is really more kind of not so much in the development side of things, but how do you get people into these developments once you build them? So, I mean, I could talk about a few of my personal experiences, but I think it's more important that you just let it go and let it go around. It'll come around eventually.
Okay, I have two experiences in Norwood. One was we built a 6-home project almost right in the middle of town, but at the time it was county unincorporated. They wound up annexing it, and then we built 6 Habitat for Humanity homes on the parcel. That was pretty easy. It was pretty easy to do. My second project, though, is something that hasn't happened yet and has run into a lot of issues. It's a friend of mine who is trying to develop a fairly large parcel, excuse me. And one of the things that I'm really probably going to focus on with this group is what's the Wrights Mesa Town Residential, which is that bordering area around the town of Norwood that's unincorporated. But it always gets into this situation with the town of Norwood because I think it's part of their expansion for their master plan into that territory. So who are you dealing with? What regulations are you abiding by? Particularly the east side of Norwood is very hodgepodge, as far as the streets, the lots even. One could be in town, one could be unincorporated. The town of Norwood is undergoing the same thing. They're trying to get the funding to undergo the same thing right now with their land use code and their master plan. It's gonna be a big deal. So this lot is quite large. The owner could build probably up to 25 homes on it. But I'm working with him and he's very, very interested in something that's my big passion, and you'll probably hear me talk about it over and over, and that's cottage housing. I'm really, really passionate about sustainable small homes with common areas. It's very conducive to senior housing, but also to families. And so that's what we're probably going to aim on, but he's already run into so many issues that he's turned around and tried to sell the property. He couldn't get through the process.
And that land is in the county?
It's very complicated. One street is town.
Okay.
Kay knows a lot more about this too, so she can correct me. And I know the owner doesn't like the bureaucracy. He doesn't deal well with it. But one street is county. The parcel itself is in town. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. but one street, so it's about access. And, again, just to simplify it, it's really just about that borderland with the town and how to get through that red tape.
Thank you, Nita. I see a hand up from Paul Major. Paul, would you like to unmute and add to the comments you just heard from Nita?
Do I have the floor?
You do.
Our project we worked on was the Pinion Park 24 home affordable housing project. It's an infill at Norwood, which we did in about 15 months. Uh, my experience was great. It was great working with the county, great working with the town. Um, the 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 if you're not indoctrinated by land use codes and master plans and everything else, you're kind of wondering, why am I on this weird journey? Because all we were trying to do is build homes, price for the local workforce. And so I want to put two sort of pins out there. One is to talk a little bit at some point about the outcome that we're looking for. If you think about building a car, you don't start with, you know, you start with how fast should the car go? How many people should it seat? What's the price? And you work backwards. And we've got it backwards in housing. We've got all these prescriptive uh, things that we have to jump through: land use codes, building codes, master plans, and we forget about what we're actually trying to build and why we're trying to build it, and particularly in affordable housing, because it does come down to economics. It comes down to the price of the house. So I'd like us to, hopefully at some point, think about the outcome versus the process or the prescription that we're all stuck in. The second thing is to put a pin on housing needs assessments. So in Uray County, and I'm not sure what the data is in San Miguel, there's a 66% error rate on housing needs assessments. It's because they use the American Community Survey, which has a 66% error rate for determining households and so on and so forth, how they create this housing needs assessment. So I'd like us to put a pin in the housing needs assessment, because what we did had zero correlation to either a housing needs assessment or all of the sort of conventional wisdom of how many houses we needed, when did we need them, how did we get. So there's a complete disconnect there. And we need to take a step back and understand really who wants to, and there are two different markets: there's rental and there's ownership. Who actually wants to own a house near where they work? There is no direct correlation between having a job and wanting to live where you work. Most Americans commute more than 50 hours, each way for a job. So it's important for, I think, this group to take a step back and think about the housing needs assessments, because yeah, and we're working all over the state now, so it's not just what our experience in Norwood, but we know they are fundamentally flawed. And the state knows they're fundamentally flawed. And we've created a lot of mechanisms around them that aren't working. And so I think that's an important part to put into this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. If anyone else in the Zoom would like to speak, go ahead and raise a hand and I'll continue back. Yeah, I see Jason Souls with a hand up. Jason, would you like to speak?
I gave like the real hand up, not just the screen hand. So just for me, I'm going to stick to a couple really tactical items. I know you get to know me. That's kind of what it is. I'm a management consultant by career and really focusing on details. So kind of back to the question for me, obstacles and experiences that I had with our development, twofold. One was dealing with the conversion into condominiums from the original design and sort of land use and PUD that we had. So certainly in Dolores County, that was a big issue. So different for San Miguel, but still thinking about ownership options, I guess, would be maybe the slightly broader view of that. The other really tactical item that I know has been kind of it's on an agenda here is around building height using modular, depending on the site. For a single family home that we built, trying to use modular with, full floor and floor ceilings, full ceiling stacked was definitely an issue as we looked at a 35-foot height requirement along with a sloped roof requirement.
Thanks, Jason. Tony Gariani.
Thanks, Lance. Yeah, I've got two things I want to share, but I'd like to just back up for a minute and just get a couple definitions. I'm trying to understand kind of the frame and the scope of what we're doing first of all, how are we defining unincorporated areas in the county? Are we talking West End? Are we talking unincorporated areas near Telluride? I'm thinking of things like the El Tesoro area, the airport, East Telluride around Idorado, the West Meadows.
For you, it's anything that is not within a municipal boundary. So that would exclude the town of Telluride proper and the town of Mountain Village, town of Norwood, town of Sawpit and Oakland. Those are the 5 incorporated towns within the county.
Okay, thanks. So that all of that is on the table. And then as far as the 1,134 units that have been identified as being needed before 2034, I'm just curious, of the developments that have been approved on the east side of the county, Telluride, Mountain Village, et cetera, how much more capacity is there within those subdivisions, those municipalities, to address the 1134? Or are we saying that the entire need to build a 1134 comes from unincorporated areas? Does somebody know how much more capacity the approved municipalities and developments around Telluride still have?
Jared Biggs had an answer for you, Tony.
I was gonna mention, this is not a perfect number. No jurisdiction has an absolute number that they are going to build or are responsible to build. But I think that for the most part, the housing needs assessment, as flawed a document as it may be, identifies that, kind of almost a third relationship between what would go inside municipal boundaries, particularly Mountain Village and Telluride, and what would be in the county. But again, these are not perfect numbers. These are all very aspirational items. And so that's kind of the thing that weighs in. We know this housing will be built in all 3 of those jurisdictions, right? And we're just looking because this is specifically involving the county's code, which applies in those unincorporated areas. That's where we're trying to see, is there something that's inhibiting that construction?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. So just 2 real quick recent experiences related to housing. Serving on the water board in Norwood, we were faced with, it wasn't a formal application to the board, but a developer came before us who had applied for a workforce housing project, otherwise known as a man camp, just west of Norwood, in Redvale, which is part of our service area. It's in Montrose County, but he needed assurance to continue with his application. He needed to submit a letter to Montrose County that he had adequate water for his project. So he came before the Water Commission, and we were not able to satisfy his request for us to write a letter to support his project as far as water is concerned. So I just piggybacking on what Peter said earlier, I think I don't think we can consider some of these land use codes in isolation. I think infrastructure really does need to be considered. And I know, you know, in the packet that we got, it's outside of the scope of what we're speaking of, but infrastructure just seems so basic. And if we want to make changes to the land use code and we want to set ourselves up for success, you can't look at it in isolation. I think it has to be a holistic approach. Water obviously is going to be a big consideration, no matter where in the county we're talking about changes and possible new housing. The second experience has to do with hiring and seasonal workers. I noticed in the handout this issue's being addressed a little bit, and that is we've had applicants on Telluride Ski Patrol, for which I work in the wintertime, who are seasonal workers who are asking about being able to park their RVs for the winter so that they can work. They're not looking for a housing option where they enter into a rent agreement for a whole year and are locked in. They're seasonal, they're here 4 or 5 months, they move on to be guides, fishing guides, mountain guides, whatever. And they live out of their vans. Vans have come a long way. They're now winterized. They're all-wheel drive. They're pretty solid housing options for a lot of people. So I just bring that up as something for us to consider.
Thank you, Tony. I see heads nodding in the room. Stephanie, I see your hand up, but before I call on you, I just want to emphasize something that Jared said before we get too hung up on the 1,134 units that were specified by the housing needs assessment. I was presented with that information by the consultants who did all the math, and they cheerfully admitted 2 things. One, these are rough numbers, and 2, we've been doing this for all these communities across the state at the because it's necessary to suddenly have a housing needs assessment current and up to date in order to get state funds. And no community has got any chance of actually reaching these numbers. And so it's possible to get really focused on, we need to hit 1134 and we're good, or we don't hit 1134 and we're doomed. And my personal understanding is we're all going to do our best. And we're going to get to a number that speaks to Pete's and Nick's concerns about carrying capacity, about environmental aspects and quality of life. But we also are sitting in this room because we all agree that we could use more housing. So with that sort of nebulous balance that Pete spoke at, I'd like to try not to get too hung up on the housing needs assessment and the actual numbers. John, I see you. And you're next. Stephanie, we're going to hold on you because here in the room, John Pandolfo wants to respond to me, I think.
Well, just a very quick question for perspective, and I apologize if it was somewhere and I missed it. The rough number for what we need is 1134. What's the rough number for what we have?
That is a question that is so hard to answer because it depends on where in the hopper the potential development is. And so some of the questions that Jared and Kay have been trying to field are, there's a possibility of a number of units in the southwest corner of Telluride, but they are not, certainly not built. They're certainly not approved. They're certainly under discussion. How do you count that? Does it chip away at the 1134 and make us all feel better or not? And that's where I'm saying, let's not get hung up on exactly the number, but just agree that when we know the number, we'll knock it off the top and we'll keep doing the math. All I'm asking is that we just try to focus on not whether or not the housing needs assessment was deeply flawed, a little flawed, dead wrong, spot on. It doesn't really matter. We're not going to get there. And with that, we can proceed as best we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was more like, how many do we have COs on that people are actually living in or maybe vacant second?
Understood. I believe that since the housing needs assessment was completed, we may have chipped away between, I'm going to make up a number 30 and 50 max.
So, in the east end of the county, there are about 5,000 dwelling units. Approximately half of those are occupied as permanent residences, so asset vacant. second homes. Of that, approximately 2,500, half of those are deed restricted. So, and, you know, this includes all the municipalities. So this is just the east end. I don't have any that include, the mesas and the west end. But, you know, just, you know, if you go on, you know, Sweet Deals, how many people are looking for housing? A lot.
Stephanie, you've been very patient. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to speak briefly, although I could spend a longer time on this topic of Telsky's Ilium Affordable Housing Project. I was very involved in my time at Telsky, and John Miller may want to weigh in on this as he was involved as well. And I just thought it would be a good example to share my perspective from the developer point of view and the challenges faced by Telsky as the developer. This was an affordable housing PUD and substantial plat amendment project that began in 2017. And that's when Telsky bought 25 lots in Ilium adjacent to the Two Rivers homes that are already built there. Not part of Two Rivers, but adjacent to that. And the land use code sections that were involved were the Affordable Housing PUD Zone District, which is 5-305. And then we were also working with the county R1 deed restriction. And I don't know if part of our job here over the next couple of months is to look at that R1 deed restriction. I'm not going to really get into it right now, but the impacts, the project really until the homes that were built were sold finally this summer in 2025, it was really an 8-year project, and Telsky only ended up building 9 of the 31 allowable units under the substantial plat amendment and abandoned the rest. John Podolfo maybe can speak to that. I left Telsky in June. I believe at that time, the rest of the vacant lots that Telsky had not built upon were under contract, or there was a letter of intent to sell them to the school district. So as a private developer, not a municipality, Telsky was faced with time delays due to multiple factors, starting with the pandemic, which delayed building, and then the other factors that caused time delays were multiple agreements. Namely, we had, I think, 2 versions of an exception agreement with the county that Telsky was required to enter into because they were not a qualified buyer under the land use code. So they had to enter into an exception agreement with the county, and then the county wanted Telsky to also have a separate agreement with the neighbors, the HOA. And there were also other impacts were increased costs. Some were pandemic related, some not. So I think between the time delays and the increased costs, that kind of killed the additional phases of development. I was thinking back on the lessons learned, and one kind of overriding issue that kept coming up that was a strong point of contention with everyone is there appears to be a really strong community bias against renters versus owners. And I don't know if we at some point want to talk about that. And I know there needs to be a mix in the community. But that caused a lot of issues for Telsky because circumstances changed after the pandemic, and Telsky had to spend a lot more money than originally anticipated to build. The material costs went up, and the homes ended up costing them twice as much almost as they initially thought. And mortgage interest rates increased dramatically. And Telsky's intention was always to sell these to its own employees, not out to public qualified buyers. And so our pool of potential buyers was a small group of people who were highly valued, who Telsky wanted to sell these units to, and these employees could not afford the costs the homes at cost, and they could not afford the 6 or 7% mortgage interest rate. So Telsky ended up having to 100% subsidize the homes and bring the costs down and offer 100% financing, excuse me, and in some instances, and offered a very low interest rate, which I think is highly unusual and ended up being kind of burdensome. And I think all the parties ended up being frustrated. The county and the neighbors were frustrated with Telsky's delay in not selling these on time, and Telsky was frustrated as a developer in not being able to modify its original agreement with the county. That was pretty frustrating. The county, I can't, this was in 2019. I don't remember how this came to be, but the HOA, the neighboring HOA ended up being a third-party beneficiary to Telsky's exception agreement with the county, which, looking back on it, I think that was unusual as well. The county can speak to that, whether they normally allow private parties to be essentially a party to their agreement with the developer, because it made it almost impossible to make an amendment or modification with the county, because we had to go through a private party and get their approval to modify the agreement with the county. So lessons learned. I I I think I just shared those, and happy to answer questions. That was my experience in representing Telsky through this process.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'll go to Amy Levick. Or Danny Kraft, excuse me.
Lance was my teacher.
I did want to call on you back. That is my Danny. Go ahead.
So I don't really have anything directly that I was involved in as a development, but obviously I've financed a lot of projects. And you know, the thing that just comes to mind is not really something I can speak directly to about one of my clients, but more just with regards to ADUs that I continue to kind of see as a problem, at least in my opinion. And you know, right now in unincorporated city, kind of, let's say you're in Down Valley, whatever, by Wood, sorry, Bibby today. If you're somewhere in that area and you want to build an ADU, it requires a deed restriction of that ADU individual unit. And you know, what I've seen from my clients and a lot of people within the community is that they just decide not to build it. So even though that cost would be on them to build that ADU, that cost would be on them to do all that, they've decided not to, because it clouds title, creates a problem when it comes to future sales, all that type of stuff. So although that they could earn some income in the interim, you know, it removes a housing unit that potentially could be there. You know, obviously the negative side of that, or the opposite side, is that someone could just build an ADU and it could just sit empty. So, you know, that's the hard part about it. But on the same side, I hope that we can come to a way where we can incentivize individuals to build ADUs on their dime. And on top of it, we can create housing that's required within the community. So
then you're saying that whatever deed restriction would be put on the ADU is what's scaring people, they don't want to do it. Yeah.
I've had at least 3 clients that decided not to do it. So it's just, you know, I don't know exactly what that solution is, but on the same side, I do hope that we can come to a solution to where we can, because, you know, when I look at affordable housing, I look at the biggest problem, Paul's point, is funding, you know, and it's the economics of it. And, you know, how do you create that economics? And if you're disincentivizing people to build units at no cost to the community outside of their costs. I don't know, you know, is there a way that we can incentivize versus do incentives?
Thank you, Tammy. Let's go to Amy Levick.
I'm gonna speak not to one particular project, but to a number that I've been involved with or have observed, you know, through the approval process and building process. And part of the problem, and I think it's included in this information, is the process. I mean, time is money, and the longer that it takes to review, you know, to get to the final endpoint, the more uncertainties there are and the more expensive something is liable to be. And so if there's some way of adding any uncertainty and, you know, an idea of how long it's going to take, that's really, really helpful. And the other thing is conflicting information or late information in the review process. There may be conflicts between master plan, development standards, et cetera, or standards that don't necessarily apply to housing, but they're there. And to meet those standards is sometimes more expensive or irrelevant to what's being built. But also, I'm thinking of the review agencies, and that if the power company doesn't give the information that's needed, you know, to understand what the costs are going to be and where things need to go, and then comes back later and says, "Oh, we want it over here," that can sometimes be a real problem. So, you know, I don't know how you regulate the reviewers of the project as well, but that's certainly a problem sometimes. So, anyways, just leave it at that.
Thanks, Amy. John Pandolfo.
Just a quick response to what Stephanie said earlier in terms of, you know, referencing the school district. The school district did close on 17 units, 3 open space and 14 building units for 22 lots down in Two Rivers. And that combined with wanting to put units behind the school itself and having building lots in Rico, we're looking to we're right now drafting an RFP for a developer to look to develop all of the 34 units as one larger project. Hopefully to get some of the economies of scale, some of the other things that I referenced. And I'm kind of a school superintendent, not exactly a real estate developer, but somehow I'm a little bit of both. So I think I'm gonna have a lot to learn with this, and we're gonna, you know, thus far, we have the units that we've had in the time I've been here have been just straight purchase. We can't sustain that at the cost of purchase, so we're hoping to do better. And the school district does have experience going back 20+ years on small developments, 4 units here, 6 units there. But I don't have a lot of basis for that to understand what the implications of those.
Thanks, John. Catherine Warren.
So unlike a lot of folks in the room, I haven't been, you know, directly involved in certain projects, but my own personal experience I'll just share real quick. I was lucky enough to buy in Boston Hill 5 years ago, and I remember at the time your wife said, "Can you afford this mortgage?" And I said, I'll figure it out because it's housing and I'm making it work. And in that 5 years, homes similar to mine are now being sold for double what I paid for. And that's great whenever I want to cash out. I don't want to cash out. This is my community. But the concern I now have is my friends and folks who weren't lucky enough to be able to buy 5 years ago, or a generation below me. I'm looking at you, Nikki, sorry. Affordability for the next generation below. And I would say, you know, any future project that's an unincorporated county, I think it would be wise to look at a price cap on those units. And I actually, as a private resident, I provided that public comment when this discussion was being made for Meadowlark, because it assures some cap to the cost in the future for the next buyer. And, you know, I had a deed restricted price cap unit in town. I lived in town in Telluride for 5 years. I still turned a decent profit. And if you know that's the deal going into your home purchase, it just helps ensure affordability of some sort for the next generation below us.
I'm agreeing with most what everyone else is saying.
Thanks, Catherine. Drew?
Just project specifically, obviously the town has been working on this Ilium housing project. There and went out to RFP a year and a half ago, it was maybe even more for pre-development services. And to look for a partner, in all of that. And we had, I think, 13 different organizations, walk through the site with us. And only 2 of them gave us a response to our RFP. And a lot of that had to do with a lack of certainty around infrastructure, specifically roads and intersections and things like that. And I want to commend the county on the successful lobbying of CDOT for improvements to the intersection of 145 and 63L. And that's going to be a huge help, but it just kind of shows that lack of certainty scares people away from even submitting a bid with the department. One of the successful things that we did do, though, is that we did build 35 new units at Village Court Apartments, and I know it's not an incorporated grand or San Miguel County. But that project did include a modular component to it, and that modular component did save us somewhere between 20 and 30% of what that project would do. So I think there's a perception around modular construction that people have, and desire for aesthetics and other things that come along with living in the resort community. There's some trade-offs there that we may have to consider as we go through that. And now, if you were to tour our units over at VCA, we have been fairly successful. They're all full. I think the people that are there really enjoy them. They're very nice units. So that would be my win, I guess, is looking at alternate forms of construction. Before I moved here, I was in Salida, and there's actually a 3D printing company there where they're 3D printing houses now at a con, which is pretty cool. My son was actually he had an internship there, and so he got to see it firsthand when they were doing some of their test modeling. So it's pretty cool technology that's out there, and I think taking advantage of that is a real opportunity for us. Again, if you look at the homes that Veritouch is doing, they're not the most aesthetically appealing.
Pretty cool.
There's some of them that are, but there are some that are a little shaky.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they would fit necessarily in here. However, there's people that are getting pretty creative and innovative out there. And the Fading West in Via Vista is another one. They're in this too. So anyways, that's how we live it.
Thank you, Drew. So anybody else around the rest of the table would like to speak before I go to the Zoom room?
Don't really need to hear from staff.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Stephanie, I see your hand still up. Would you like to continue your thoughts, or was that hand left over from previous?
It was left over.
Yeah, I'm gonna lower it for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else in the virtual room who would like to address the questions in front of us about how a code provision impacted a particular project?
I think the only person we haven't heard from is James.
Mr. Van Hoosier, do you have anything you'd care to add? You're pro enough to raise your hand if you'd like to speak. So, Dan,
Really quick.
yes, sir.
Question. With regards to the 1,400 commuters that you referenced, do we know what industries those individuals are from?
And-
Do we have a clue?
And how many really want to live here?
Mhm.
I know.
You can always estimate, there's been surveys done over time for a lot of these housing studies. Typically, it's about 30% of commuters say they would live in the community if they could. So yes, some of those are by choice or by circumstance. It's really hard to understand who they are. Getting commute numbers at all is really hard. It's a constantly moving kind of thing. So that's hard to understand, but you can look at the general industries that are bringing in workers, typically lower wage, but not always. So short answer, those numbers are really hard to come by.
I was just wondering if we could figure out how much of that is construction related, how
Right.
much of that is, tourism related.
Mhm.
Just curious.
You
Thank
can
you.
look by income, but you do not know specifically what their job is.
Thank you. Sorry, Dan.
Kelly.
I know you wanted to steer us away from being too hung up on numbers, but I also know that the Affordable Housing Survey Assessment, the Housing Survey Assessment talks about the 1,100 number by 2034, but the number that actually stuck out to me was the current needs number, and that is 800. So it's not a future future problem. It is a problem we have now, and that is more than 75% of the need is needed today. And I think that's pretty
Right.
telling.
Those are the unfilled jobs and the commuters and the cost burden and the overcrowded.
Exactly. So when I'm thinking about housing, I'm not even thinking about 1100. I'm like 800. How do we get to 800? And then we'll talk about the future. Someday.
Be happy if we got to 50.
So
Yeah.
we made it to 11, right?
That's right. Pete, did I see your hand up? Yeah. Okay.
There was one more person online, John Miller, who's part of the committee or
Yes,
the
sir.
roundtable.
John is probably able to raise his hand with his computer, which is easier for me. It's hard for me to see everybody's physical hand in a picture without scanning the screen. But if you do want to speak from the Zoom room, please raise your virtual hand, which is the react button down in the middle of your menu. And I will respond quickly. Thank you. Jen, you want to keep asking questions? We've got about 20 some minutes, but that was time well spent. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think so. I was just gonna give a little what I heard summary and you all can chime in if I missed anything major. One thing was community character. It's not just housing, but let's make sure we're looking at the whole picture when we're looking at any kind of changes. Another thing was certainty and speed. That came up a couple times. That can be important. Another was size, not just size of development, but the size of the houses. And also the use of the houses, whether it's short-term or long-term, if it's modular or if it's some other creative way of constructing homes. So thinking about those different ways to look at it. Focusing on some areas of change. We heard about the Norwood zone. We also heard about being near transportation, making sure that we're near where people can get to work or get to their vehicles. And then infrastructure came up multiple times. I know we said that we're not water lawyers, right? But infrastructure is important considering water availability, sewer availability, roads. That's part of the big picture that will not be forgotten. And then we also heard the focus on the who, who are we housing? And that's important. It's not a number. These are households and these are people, potential community members. So that was what I heard from the group. Was there anything just larger picture that was missed in that? We're just generally looking for patterns. Go ahead.
This isn't something that we missed or you missed. It's just that I know this is a land use code, group, but, to Catherine's point about the price caps on things and, the Mountain Village has this incredible program called Your Equity Support where you don't even have to put a shovel in the ground. So should we be looking at the houses that are already here and trying to make them more affordable to people?
Right.
And that program actually does that. We're having some challenges actually making it happen, but we're trying. And I just feel like there's a lot of inventory out there that could become more affordable, deed restricted, even some of the deed restricted homes that are already, they just don't have price caps on them. So they're out of control. But a homeowner who's in that home that might be willing to deed restrict it to the point where there is a price cap on it, and so that they can get some cash to fix it up or, pay for their child's college education or whatever the case may be. It's definitely, I think, a program worth exploring more. Obviously, it has nothing to do with land use code, but it's another thing.
One comment that I heard that goes true to what I'm experiencing and the people that I know is that the commuters, I think you just quickly mentioned that 30% would like to live here and 70% would not. And I think that's something that's pretty fascinating when we look at the whole equation. Take a close look at that.
Right.
We learned a lot in the last several years, from Diamond Ridge to Easton Master Plan to Community Housing Zone District. And I think there's an underlying tension between preservation of what we perceive that we have and trying to address what we understand is a need for housing. And I think it was one of the harder friction points in that Bermuda Triangle of regulatory effort to deal with. Because I think in general, we all share an understanding that we live in paradise. The specifics of what that means varies a lot from person to person. So it's a tough nut to crack. I'm glad that we started out with whittling away at that big fat number. Because if Jared, if it's third and a third and a third, then our number for the county is more like 375, 400. If we want to think of it that way. I do think that there's more work to be done on the community housing zone district. There are some parts that we didn't get to that we would like to consider. But I think we have to recognize that there's this tension in what we're trying to accomplish, and it's not just about finding all the spots where we can put houses. I'm in sympathy and was during the entire process with the arguments that it's hard to, if not impossible, to reasonably plan if you don't have a sense of what your carrying capacity is. And we never could get our arms around how to measure it. I mean, there's some obvious ways. There's only one highway in and out. There's only one sewer plant and so forth. But I don't know, we've got a lot to chew on.
Can I comment on that? And I agree.
Pete,
why don't you, for the Zoom folks, say your name, just so they know who's talking. Thank you, Pete Johnson. And I agree, because I think I was part of that tension. And I think a lot of it comes from observing the other resorts as models that are a little bit ahead of us. And to see they're always trying to catch this employee housing or this housing need. And then more economic opportunities come, more housing needs. You know, it just goes like this. It never seems to catch. And then you see these communities that are really destroyed and are far out of bounds. So I agree with you 100%. There's a lot of us that value what we have here. And we're looking at some of these examples where it's really, frankly, a disaster. You look at all that area, you drive to Denver, you see all that. And I think a lot of people would not like to see that happen here. Try to achieve a balance without sacrificing what we love. Nina.
So that kind of goes right to something I was really curious about when I was studying land use code and everything you provided for us. The Rights Mesa Rural Ag is a huge, it's pretty much most Rights Mesa. Is that, is it 1 for 35 strictly, or
yeah,
is that for a few?
Rights Mesa Rural Agriculture is 1 for 35.
Yeah.
And
then what is the Rights Mesa Rural Residential? Is that just little pockets that already exist?
it's closer into the town of Norwood, but not necessarily right adjacent.
Okay, I can think of a few.
Yeah, there's a map in the zone.
Yeah, I downloaded that. So when was the Rights Mesa master plan updated last? I tried to find it online.
The Rights Mesa master plan was last updated in 2010.
Okay,
so it's probably
that's the
due for
one I was looking
update.
at.
So we're due for an update.
So going along with what you guys were saying, I know that the priority of that plan was to preserve these corridors. It's a beautiful mesa with the views of the mountains. In order to build more housing, this is all just hypothetical. It would probably need to be relatively close to the highway to make it, again, good for transportation. But I guess that's something I would like us to explore, work our way through this. Is there an opportunity? Because when I look at these communities, we're talking about canyons and places where there's just not a lot of land left for building on. Telluride, well, that's the town of Telluride, but even elsewhere, down valley, for example, we're in a canyon. The opportunity is really to the west. I also just want to point one thing out, because I'm really passionate about this, because now that I live in Norwood and I've been there for about 17 years, there are a lot of entities in Norwood. There's federal employees, there's state employees, there's county employees, there's a medical center, there's a school. I've thought of 10 entities, not to mention businesses, that they need housing. So it's really not just about commuters building houses for the resorts. It's about building houses, also seniors. I hate caution. So yeah, just wanted to mention that, it was something I didn't say earlier.
Thank you, Nina. What I'm hearing you say is don't ignore wood.
Yes.
Nick, I see your hand up. Nick Farco.
Nick Farco, Leah, this is actually something that I'm glad, I thought it was gonna be many meetings down the road, but when we talk about carrying capacity and the nebulous nature of carrying capacity, what does it mean to everybody? It truly is. I mean, even when you start talking about things that are seemingly very tangible, like water and sewer, infrastructure. But I thought it worth mentioning that there's one common thread that came up here today by a bunch of people, and that is traffic. And when somebody, I don't know who said it, we have one road in, type of approach where we are unique as compared to, say, Vale and Aspen and Steamboat and Breckenridge. The traffic becomes something, and I'm going to bring this to what our job is here, is to talk about a land use code. How can you actually apply traffic into a land use code? Requirements for traffic studies are one thing, but the problem is that traffic studies and traffic engineers speak a different language than the rest of us. They talk in terms of LOS, which is levels of service, and they have a grading system, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And shockingly to me, it's okay to get a C and a D in the world of traffic engineers. And if you were to look at our most recent traffic studies that were done on some of the bigger projects, you see that the Society Turnaround About, has a grade that any parent might be pretty pissed off at their kid if they got that grade. Yet, the development that's happening will bring it to even a lower grade, say an E, and that's still okay in the world of CDOT or in the world of a traffic engineer. So one tangible thing we can think about, which will objectify carrying capacity, at least in this one common thread we all share, which is getting our cars, unfortunately, many of us, is perhaps to look at the land use code as changing the criteria for those LOSs. Say that while the traffic engineer says a D is perfectly acceptable, the San Miguel County land use code says, oh, hell no, guys, that's terrible for us. And they're very, very prescribed. LOSs stand for how many seconds you sit at an intersection waiting. So it's something we can all touch and feel and really understand. Whereas the emotional side of carrying capacity, how long it takes to find a parking spot at Clark's, how long it takes to get in and out of the post office just to check your box, ski lift lines, et cetera, et cetera. Those are tough because it's really a matter of perspective. But traffic is not, it's objectifiable.
Amy Luddick.
Yeah, I want to kind of tag on to one thing that Lee was saying, how important community character is. It is, but it's also one of the most difficult things to define. And it's kind of like, it's in the eye of whoever is reviewing or looking at it, and people are going to disagree with it. So if we're going to dig into it, we got to really dig into what community character means. And I think we kind of got into trouble in the community housing district by not defining it better, not necessarily understanding what that meant. The other thing I want to say is carrying capacity is really slippery slope. Not because it's not important to understand what the capacity is of services, but it can change. Carrying capacity today of the sewer plant is one thing, but you put more money into it, you upgrade it, and then carrying capacity goes to a different level. And a lot of what we talk about carrying capacity is not, it's fluid. And so, I want to be careful about looking at that as the be all and end all to have how things are reviewed. So anyway, I don't know that I have an answer.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Nick, you had that, I really liked what you said about that's exactly at the heart of this project is, can we do a countywide transportation master plan or traffic study? Sure. But if each project individually and looking at elevating that, the level that maybe looking at the elevating the level of what of those counties would like to see. Also, I've been thinking about that. We work in a lot of different rural contexts or counties where this becomes an issue when you have multiple projects building on each other. And so there's ways that we've worked with codes to talk about that accumulation of traffic impacts. So I think that was a really great conversation to kind of get at one piece that we for sure know we need to look at in the code. With that, we're gonna stray from our agenda because we are getting close to our time, but I think we've had a really great conversation. So we were all up here saying, let's just let it keep happening organically. And we've already started to get into this, but one item on our agenda was to kind of talk about quick wins or systemic changes. And I think the traffic conversation is one. Are there any other thoughts or brainstorms that you have or areas that you think we specifically need to look into in the code? We brought up the community housing zone. Are there other areas that you all think, you know, we just really need to be opening up this can and looking into it so that we can have further conversation?
Yeah, and what we're really looking for is a complete toolbox. We want all the tools. So, you know, it might be the big hammer, it might be the full socket wrench with every single socket you can think of. It might be that little wrench that you got in your flat pack from IKEA. It was useful at the time. And so how can we find all of the tools and make them available?
Thank you, Kay. I see two hands up. Jason Sills, go ahead. Stephanie Solomon, you'll be next.
Great. I just put the topic that came up a couple times on ADU by right. Fast tracking, quick win on that.
Is that what Daniel's talking about?
Yeah.
Can someone speak to that? That's news to me. We have a deed restriction on ADU?
Okay, let me explain ADUs.
I got 10 minutes.
I'll try and do it quicker than that. The county does not require ADUs on deed restrictions. They did for a period from 1994 to 2007 if they were within the R1 school district, or actually farther east even than that. That's kind of another story. In the low density, medium density, high density zone districts, you can build an ADU. It does not have to be deed restricted. So that'd be like, you know, the ski ranches, the preserve, West Meadows, El Desaro, all those areas can have an ADU. No restriction on who can occupy them. They cannot be short-term rentals. And we know that there's a lot of violations out there. And then up on the mesas, in what we call the F zone, forestry, agriculture, open, you can do a caretaker unit that can be up to 2,000 square feet, so pretty big. And again, those don't have to be deed restricted. And we've seen a real shift from in the 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s, where people were renting them to locals, and it was important local housing, to where they're saying, you know, I paid a lot of money for this property. I don't need the rental income. I value my privacy. And they're allowing, you know, it's friends and family that are occupying them. So that is, you know, what can we do to get people into those ADUs? What sort of incentive? And then the final thing I want to say, down valley, we can't allow ADUs. Unless and until we get a water system down there, because all of those little half-acre lots are on what's called a residential well permit, and those only allow one dwelling unit. So that's our restriction in the canyon.
That's per state law.
And that's tied to state law. Up on the mesas, on 35 acres, you got a domestic well permit. Those actually allow up to 3 units. So there's a place that we might be able to come up with something.
That's news, so thank you.
I have a question. I mean, we always talk about what are the incentives that work to get people into the ADUs or to get people to build the ADUs. Is there anywhere that has incentives that are working for that in other parts of, the state?
I can speak a little bit to that. Is Summit County, and whether it's working well or not is the operative statement, but Summit County instituted something where they had a subsidy program to fund the delta between a short-term rental rate and a long-term rental rate. And it's a really simple concept, is that if you can bridge the gap and get somebody who's looking to do an ADU, and you say, look, we'll subsidize the difference so you can make just as much money as if you short-term rent it. they might be more inclined. There's lots of benefits to a long-term tenant over short-term rental. So I'm not saying that's the answer, but
The question is, did they require a deed restriction?
that I don't,
They did.
that I don't know. Did they?
They did, yeah.
Catherine Moore.
About 7 years ago, right when I started Mountain Village, they waived development fees, building permit fees. If you were to be a homeowner up there and you wanted to add an ADU and deed restricted it.
Same town, yeah.
So that's the incentive.
Kay, what's the approval process for an ADU?
Development permit, so it's administrative,
Okay.
you know.
I'd like to tag on to Summit County. They also have plans, so they've adopted a set of ADU plans, so you could come in and say, oh, I like that one, and it's an automatic approval.
Stephanie Solomon, your hand has been up for a moment.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was any interest in this group or with the county and looking at and possibly expanding the definition of what is a qualified owner, specifically given today's market and what's happening with more remote work available and the amount of money people could potentially make. If they're living here, I've had people say to me, if you're living here and your kids are going to school here and you're shopping at Clark's and you're living here full-time year-round, but you work for a company that isn't physically based here, but you're doing all your work here and you live here and your family's here, right? That would not meet the current definition of qualified employee. That person would not qualify to live in deed restricted housing. And just want to see if anyone, if there's any, take your temperature on if there's any interest in looking at that deed restriction.
Stephanie is probably the person that would be making that policy change. Why don't you and I talk offline? I think that we could go back and forth for quite a while about the advantages of your proposal versus the advantages of building housing for people that are working within the community. And I'm not sure that we get to an agreement, but we could certainly understand each other's positions more clearly. My Mac is getting low on battery. It's almost 6 o'clock. I know that Hallie had one more thing on her mind, and then I'm not sure how to wrap this up, but I'm gonna let Hallie jump in and see if you can take us home.
My question was on incentives. I know Mountain Village has a program or had a program for incentivizing deed restricting your property.
That's
It's a yes part.
Is that only for ADUs though?
No.
Can you speak to that? And is it?
Well, that's true.
Someone just wanted
So basically, the program is that if you're willing to place a deed restriction on your program or on your home, we are willing to fund up to between 15 and 18% of the cost of the home at the time of purchase, as long as you put a deed restriction on it. That deed restriction would have all the employment requirements that we have at our Meadowlark development, which means 1,560 hours in the R1 school district. And 4% price appreciation cap going forward. So it's a pretty simple program, like in terms of the theoretics around it. We're struggling a little bit to get some real strong interest in it. I think that's just simply because the cost of purchasing a home in our region is so expensive that $100,000 or $200,000 isn't going to mean much in the grand scheme of things when your average home price is $8.5 million.
That's for Mountain Village.
That's in Mountain Village, we also did expand that program beyond the boundaries of Mountain Village. So we include both the R1 and the Norwood R2 school district. So we're basically branching out to see if there's anybody else that can get some interest on.
What do you mean? So a house that's in the county can get the deed restriction and you'll pay them for that?
Yep.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
And R2 as well, and Norwood as well.
Who did we contact to learn more about that?
Contact Drew.
Drew. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Folks, it is after 6. I want to disrespect anybody's time. And Jen, you said that we could run over, but I fear if we start running over, we're going to be here till 9:30, 10.
Or pizza.
Or tomorrow.
Yeah, or tomorrow. We could popcorn this for quite a while. Instead, what I propose is that we all commit to a 2-hour meeting next time. There are schedules, so we have a little more time. And also accept that this is going to take us more than 3 meetings. And if we can all be here as much as we can, especially in the room, which seems to be a benefit for getting your voice heard easier, then I recommend that we finish up this evening with Amy's last comment.
Yeah, this is kind of a logistics thing. I'm actually missing a meeting for another board I'm on, so if I could ask that it not be 4 PM on the first Monday of the month, that would be. I'm open to a lot of other comments.
Okay, we're never, with a group this size, we are never gonna get a meeting time that
Right.
works for everybody, but we will do our level best to at least shuffle it around so everyone's inconvenienced equally.
Can we be part of that discussion? I don't know if you were, but I wasn't even part of that discussion.
I think this one was just a dart at the board.
That's fair enough.
Yes, sir.
That's a question slash suggestion. Would it be possible to share email contacts for this entire group so that if, there's just a lot of people that are symbiotic in their thoughts and might be able to share, it might go a long way to the next meeting being more productive.
Is that possible, Sarah?
I think you would all have to opt in to be willing to share with
Is
each
there
other.
anybody who's unwilling to share their email? Please raise your hand.
Technicality.
It's not.
Yeah, the other thing, so you'll see, we handed out our group rules of engagement. Yeah, hope that you would read through them and sign those. And part of this is due to the fact that we had sharing of emails outside the group. So we've had a past issue. So I kind of feel like the best way is to route it through our main email and then we'll broadcast it that way. Rather than having, trying to keep track of, 24 people in an email thread. And
I'm sure I wasn't thinking, I was just thinking that if I just met Pete, if I want to email Pete, I could ask him for his email address, but to go to the list and say, Pete had some comments that I'd like to follow up, or Danny had some comments on deed restrictions and ADUs, is that not practical?
I think for that purpose, Nick, as long as everybody agrees to sharing and they sign these papers, I think that's possible. For sure.
Especially for the advisory committee.
Yeah.
Things like that. I think for the advisory committee, as long as we're all comfortable sharing emails and let us know immediately if you're not, let's plan to do that, but also let's not plan to take them outside of the advisory committee to avoid the situation that Kay described where there was vitriol being brought to you because you were serving in the committee from outside, okay?
we fully encourage you to reach out to your own constituencies and talk to them. But please don't forward emails that have everybody's email address on it. It's basically it.
Yeah.
So there's 2 more sessions this week, right?
So
Not of this one.
not of this group, but what we have is community listening sessions. So tomorrow morning
Starting at 7 a.m. we'll be here at the library. Any one of you is welcome to come. We also have one-on-one signups available. If you'd like to have a 30-minute one-on-one, definitely welcome that as well. It's always different as part of a group than it is as an individual, getting to talk about some of the things you see and understand about the code. So we encourage that as well. All of that is on the San Miguel County Code website.
and then, so if you go to the website, it has the full schedule. 4 p.m. we're in Mountain Village, 6 p.m. we're in Ophir. And then Wednesday, 7 a.m. we're in Norwood. And then around noonish, we're in Placerville.
And these are not gonna be Zoomed. Right?
No.
These are in person, yeah.
Okay, so these are opportunities for outside in communication.
Correct. Oh, yeah, totally open to anyone that wants to come.
Okay,
Which includes you guys, so.
Yeah.
but we're not expected to attend.
No,
No,
No.
we had one upstairs here this afternoon. We had 5 people there. It was a good conversation.
Cool.
yeah, and those open office hours are intended to be, people could drop in for a half hour and talk to us, or like the group that came today, they all came at the same time. So we had a nice little small group conversation. We do have plenty of time tomorrow between 10 and 1, wide open, if any of you wanna sign up for a one-on-one.
And that's here.
Yeah, those will be here at the library.
What day is the one in Norwood?
Wednesday.
Okay.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, there's an intention to offer electronic one-on-ones
Yeah.
as we continue through this process, using the, time of our consultants whenever they are here to the best of our ability. And also making sure that there's open feedback that can be received in other ways as well.
And what's the location in Norwood? The sheriff is. Yeah, it was. And also you go to our website, you'll see, we'll be posting all of our updates and such as we move along, encouraging people to look at those. And we always accept emails, housing update at San Miguel County CO.gov.
It's actually on the screen at the moment, that's helpful for you all.
And, so, yeah.
So just as we wrap up, I would say we have a general shared understanding of the challenge. We did look at some initial barrier identification, found a few potential trends that we're seeing, some priority areas for deep dives. So there will be a summary of this meeting posted within 72 hours. We've got that as required. Trying to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be engaged and understand what we're talking about and doing as a group. We will go back and do more of a detailed code analysis after this meeting. We've heard from you all. It's incredibly helpful. We will take a separate look at the code. We'll be coming back to you with specific questions and thoughts and be having some more, obviously, back and forth and conversations as we move forward. And the next meeting will be more of a deep dive into some of the highest priority issues that arise.
Thank you, Sarah.
We'll do a send out, we'll probably ask.
There's a pile of things for people there.
Yeah, we can get a sense of, schedule. Dates, times.
You could send out a doodle for once, kind of some times that works for people and capitalize on the highest ranked opportunity. But we really, again, appreciate your feedback and your help, and I think this meeting was very positive, and housing can be a very difficult topic sometimes, and sometimes very emotional for folks. So I really appreciate the positive spin on everything and how, giving us ideas to dive deep on it. And feel free to reach out for some individual one-on-ones if you want to have some additional conversation. Or just have questions about things that will help you. How much?
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's like we see a lot of each other.